Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here for this live stream. If you have comments or questions, please leave them in the live chat. I'll try to get to all of those if I'm able to. Please let me know if you can hear me or if you're having trouble hearing me. That way I can make adjustments as needed. I have one question in the chat, which I'll get to in just a moment. I thought I'd begin the live stream by discussing real quickly. I haven't been able to read as much in the months of February and the months of March because I had some craziness happen at school. And then in April, we just started our spring break, and because of that, my work schedule like opened up completely. So because of that, I've had a ton of time to read, and so in the last 3 days, I've been able to read 3 books, which for me is quite impressive. And so I'm getting back into the swing of things, and hopefully we'll continue the year strong. So right now, I am focused on reading as much as I can, getting through my TBRs, trying to get back on track from when I got derailed back in February and March. And it has actually been several weeks since actually several months, I should say, since I actually started um, uh, doing live streams. And I was like planning to do like a live stream on the month. And then all of a sudden, I just like dropped off at after December, and I haven't done a live stream since December. So yeah, I need to pick that back up. It's been like 4 months. So I already see some comments. Um, uh, Raffinetti says, you get a wish from a genie to have one Star Wars author to write a novel uh, about a star character of your choice in Star Wars. Which author and character do you choose? Well, the author, I'm a little biased. I'm going to go with my friend John Jackson Miller. And the character I would want him to write is Hera. I think that he could do a good Hera novel. He wrote Hera in another novel, but he hasn't written a dedicated Hera novel. So I'd like to see that. Good to see Raffinetti and Hymns Are Beautiful. Can you get some Christian book recommendations soon? Maybe. I know the Ted Dekker Circle series is an excellent fantasy series written by Ted Dekker. That's a good recommendation. I'd also recommend, of course, Chronicles of Narnia. That's probably the best. The next, yeah, thank you, Raffinetti, for the feedback. One book a day, it is impressive for me. It's impressive for anyone, but although 2 of the books were a little bit shorter, but one of the books was like 800 pages. But that's because I've been working hard. I worked hard on getting that one done. As for those who follow you and educators, can make for a better teacher or working on it? Probably not. I don't really address that type of stuff too much on my channel. I'm trying to focus just on the novels and the novels that I'm reading and the other forms of prose. Raffinetti says, I mean, like it's not like maybe I could, but that's not really the focus of where I want my channel to go. Raffinetti says, I'd want Claudia Gray to try to portray Luminara Unduli and Barriss Offee, given how her Master and Apprentice turned out. That's a good one. I think she'd do a good job with that. I'd also like to see her do the Obi-Wan and Satine novel that we've been begging them to do for years. I think that they could do Obi-Wan and Satine real well. So next I see Fit to Be Read. Thanks for joining us. I see Janeway, Kirk, or Picard. Ooh, that's Janeway is my captain all the way. I'm a huge Janeway fan. I think that Janeway is fantastic in the novels. I think she's fantastic in the show. She does not get the attention that she needs. The feat she pulls off of getting everyone back to the Alpha Quadrant, I think, is just superb. I think it's just fantastic. And I think that Kate Mulgrew deserves a lot of praise for that as well. Although I do love Picard and Kirk, I love Janeway more. Although I've read the most of Picard novels, and I really do enjoy the character of Picard. So I'd probably say Picard's a close second. Although Kirk's also a close second too. Oh man, they're all so good. But yeah, Janeway is my captain. There's 3 ways to do something: the right way, the wrong way, and the Janeway. But all right. Next, Hymns Are Beautiful says favorite book of the Bible, Hosea. Absolute favorite. Absolute favorite. Followed closely by 1 Samuel. Steve Holmes says, you think the canon will ever delve into post-sequel era stuff like Legends series, New Jedi Order, Fate of the Jedi? Will the canon ever do that? No. Will Star Wars ever go back to that? Very much possible. I think that the pitch I've made is that we could do a Star Wars What If series that's animated. If it's animated, you don't necessarily need to have the original actors back, since a lot of them have been passing away. Also, if you do it animated, you do not need to worry about making it too big or too small. You can just adapt the novels straight up. I think that that's the way that they should do that if they wanted to. In the canon, they should go their own direction there. Although I'm all for incorporating elements. For instance, I don't necessarily want them to beat for beat redo the Thrawn trilogy, but I'm glad that they brought the character in and that they're using elements of the trilogy. Similarly, I want them to tell Old Republic stories and maybe use some of the Old Republic characters, but I don't necessarily want them to just retell or some of the Old Republic stories that have already been told necessarily. Like I like to see some more Revan stories, maybe some others. So that's what I think of that. I do intend to read Fate of the Jedi eventually, but I have read New Jedi Order and The Legacy of the Force, and they were excellent. Great books, Guy. Thank you for joining us. Says, I'm almost finished reading the original Legends Thrawn trilogy. What should I read next in Legends? Well, I'm assuming that you've not read any other Legends or read too much Legends. Correct me if I'm wrong, Great Books, Guy. I would say that I would go to the I'd say the X-Wing series. The X-Wing series or the Jedi Academy trilogy. Those are the two I would go to next. Those are the two paramount, like that's what built the EU era. And then you can go to the other Bantam era books, but you could go you just need the foundation of those two. iJedi, which connects the X-Wing and Jedi Academy, and then from iJedi you could go to the Hand of Thrawn duology, and then you're out of the Bantam era. But that's what I thought. Let's see. I have two fit to be read. Says, finish the sentence. By Grabthar's hammer. Someone else answered it. I shall be avenged. Okay. Not aware of that. I don't know what that's from, unfortunately. It says, as someone debating to become a teacher, do you incorporate faith into lessons? Yes. That's a different subject, but that's because of the way my school wants me to operate. That one guy named Rami says, hey, Jonathan, hope you're doing well. If you were to pick 5 stories from Legends, if you were to pick 5 stories from Legends to bring back into canon, what would you pick? And have you read the Clone Wars novels from 2002 to 2005? I've read a couple of them. I read Shatterpoint, which everyone else loves, and I thought was not for me. And then I read Deception, which I did not think was that good. Trying to think of others that I actually read. I read the Republic Commando, some of those, but I don't think those were from 2002 to 2005. So I can't necessarily go with those. The Approaching Storm isn't technically a Clone Wars novel, even though it came out in that period of time. So maybe you could count that as what I've read. 5 Legends stories to bring back into the canon. Yeah, that goes into this thing of I want to incorporate characters and elements, but not necessarily just bring a story into the canon. But of course, my favorites are Kenobi, the Thrawn trilogy, the Hand of Thrawn duology, some of the New Jedi Order, and also would I say Knight Errant? No, I'm not going to say Knight Errant. I'm going to say Outbound Flight, which Outbound Flight kind of already is in the canon. If you've read the Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy, you understand that reference. Great Books Guy says this from Galaxy Quest movie. Yes, everyone talks about that. They say that's one of the best Star Trek movies, even though it's not a Star Trek movie because it's about like going to a Star Trek convention type thing. I just have never gotten into it. But I love Tim Allen and I love Star Trek, so you'd think that should be right up my alley. Raffinetti says, currently going through From a Certain Point of View for a New Hope book. Do you have a favorite story among the 40 ones in it? Yes, I do have a few, and I'm going to quickly grab it so that I don't just get in trouble for naming something off the top of my head. So let me quickly find the ones I would consider are the best. I really enjoyed Ramus, the first one by Gary Whitta, the one that bridges Rogue One to A New Hope. I thought that the red one by Ray Carson was great and actually kind of ties into The Mandalorian now. Rights by John Jackson Miller, amazing. Master and Apprentice by Claudia Gray, probably the best, even though it's not my favorite, but that one is amazing. Trying to go through some of them. Fully Operational was fantastic by Beth Revis. Beth Revis is actually doing a pretty good job on Star Wars. Palpatine by Ian Desher. That one was hilarious. Palpatine, like I even went to my English teacher and because this came out when I was in high school and I was a senior, and I read to her the Palpatine short story because I thought she would get a kick out of it. She's not even a Star Wars fan, and she thought it was hilarious. Trying to remember some of the others. Wills by Tom Engelberger was also pretty good. What was the one? Was Contingency Plan? No, it's not that one. One of the ones, I forgot the name of it, but the one that kind of ties into the political stuff of Rogue One. It's right after that where they're all like leaving Yavin 4 and they have the discussion with Mon Mothma. That one was really good. So those are the favorites, I would say, from that. All right, let's see where the chat jumped to. Mine is Paul Dini's Boba Fett story. Okay, yeah, that one was pretty good. Kim's Beautiful says, can you review Divergent? I'd be willing to donate some money in your chat. I want to hear your reviews. I am like, it's one of those series that I do want to get into eventually. I just haven't yet, but I do really intend to read that. Great book. Skipped one. Fit to be read says, have you read The Sparrow? The Sparrow. I have not. Can you tell me the author? I can write it down. I have a continuing list on my phone where I go through like recommendations that I've gotten from the chat, and I try to get to them if I can. So I'll try to put that down if you can tell me who the author was. Great Books Guy says, your thoughts on Mandalorian season 3 so far? I'm loving it. This is like, I know some people like don't like Mando season 3 quite as much, but it's just I just find it delightful. The second episode with Mandalore, the third episode with Coruscant, the fourth episode, the fifth. They're so good. Like the first episode's the weakest. I'll admit the first episode of the season was not that amazing, but there's just so many cool things. What the end of the second episode had me jump out of my chair with excitement. I was so happy with that. Secondly, I actually had an ant infestation while watching the second one, and I had ants crawling up my legs as the kind of creepy creature was messing with Mando and kind of torturing him. And so that was the worst 4D experience you could have with Mando season 3. But I loved that. I loved the most recent episode. I thought that was really great with the character that returned. The plot, I really hope they go in a certain direction by the end of the series. They need to stick the landing where you can have good individual episodes, but to have a good season, you need to wrap up and pay things off. And I don't know how they're going to do that, but I'm having a blast with it. Let's see where I am. Joe Jack says, hi there. I've read Thrawn's original Thrawn trilogy and the duology. I'm wanting to read 2017's Thrawn. I'm wondering how I should read about the past non-canon books when I read Thrawn 2017. Well, you really only have one more book to read of the other Thrawn books. There's just Outbound Flight. And I think that you can absolutely read the new Thrawn books in the canon without reading Outbound Flight, but you'll notice things if you've read Outbound Flight. You'll notice tiny details that will pay things off. And there's a character that will pay it off. The way I feel about it is I love the old Thrawn books. Some of my favorite books in Legends are the old Thrawn books, particularly the Hand of Thrawn duology. But I also, some of my favorite canon books are the new Thrawn books. And I view them as it's the same character in two different periods of his life in two different timelines. Like, you know how in the MCU you have like a multiverse? That's how I view this Thrawn. It's the same character, just in two different universes. And so you're able to see at different points in his life, different decisions he would make. And so I really enjoy all the Thrawn books, and I think they're all well worth it. That one guy named Raimi says, "Are you still considering to talk about Cloak of Deception? I remember you saying how much you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it too." I have a video called Six Books That Got Me Into Reading that's coming out this Saturday. You should check that out. I think you might be happy with that, Raimi. Raffinetti says, I actually read the red one the day before the episode, not knowing he would show up. A surprise, to be sure, but a welcome one. Yes, indeed. Yes. That's serendipitous timing, to be sure. Serendipitous timing. Him as someone interested in sci-fi, you should look into 1 Second After by William Fortson. All right, you guys. I always dread writing down recommendations because it derails my whole TBR pile because I have to add all these recommendations. But I'm gonna do it because people have said them. So what was it? 1 Second After. William Fortson. All right. Lazy Fishy. Hello, Lazy Fishy. Good to see you. Says, hey, Jonathan, nice to see you in a live stream. Yes, I'm sorry it's been so long. I wish I had done more. Jacob Ritter says, who are some of your favorite Star Wars characters of all time? Characters of all time. I mean, my number 1 is Thrawn. My number 2 is Ahsoka. Trying to think of some others. My number 3, I really love Oren Galt from the Kenobi novel. I also really enjoy Loden Greatstorm from the High Republic. I love Loden Greatstorm. He's great. Trying to think. I love Orson Krennic from Catalyst and Rogue One. I really enjoy Kanan and Hera. Really enjoy Jin as well, Jin Erso. Vi Moradi from Phasma. Vi Moradi is fantastic. Yeah, that's what my list would have to be. Yeah. And Cornhorn. All right. Let's go through who next. Philip. I don't know how to pronounce your last name. I'm sorry. What do you think of the Han Solo adventures? I assume you are talking about these Han Solo. Yeah, you have to be talking about these ones because it's called the Han Solo Adventures. The Han Solo at Star's End, Han Solo's Revenge, and Han Solo at Lost Legacy. I understand how a lot of people like them, and I think that they, as science fiction stories, are really entertaining. They just don't feel like they fit in Star Wars for me, but that's because Star Wars hadn't been really fully established. They had one movie when these 3 books were written. They had one movie to go off of. And so it's understandable that these books would not be necessarily like the rest of the Star Wars mythos. So they're enjoyable science fiction reads, and maybe it's just the format of reading them in a bind up, but it just like I felt meh about 2 of them, and I felt like one of them just wasn't great. I like them better than the Lando Adventures. Don't care about the Lando Adventures. That's my controversial one. Balawi says, do you own or read some of the source books for Star Wars? Stuff like the Essential Guides, Imperial Handbook, etc. I do not own them. I've considered buying them, but I am a prose person and specifically a novel person. I occasionally do short stories or novellas because the people who do those are typically novel people and I want to support them. But I don't really own source books because I wouldn't go through and read them. I'm like, if I'm going to read something, sit down and flip through, I want to flip through a novel. That's just me. Not saying it's wrong if you do that, but I want to do novels. So I really haven't gotten into source books. And also froze up for a moment. Let me know in the chat if you have if you can't hear me or anything. I'll keep talking otherwise. But I was answering about the source books when I think I went off, and I love I wish I could get into source books, but oh, we're good now. Okay, thanks. I love the idea of source books, but it's not a thing that I've gotten into yet. But one of my friends, Bull Run, I don't know if Bull Run's in the chat. Bull Run, my friend, he loves source books. It's the only thing when we talk about books, he loves talking about them. Next, Goobers. Do you have a favorite book cover? Yes, I do. I do have a favorite book cover. It is David Farland's The Rune Lords, my favorite book cover. Although I have several books that would be like close seconds, but that's my favorite. All right. Next I have Great Books Guy favorite Star Trek TOS episode. I'm gonna get in so much trouble because I'm not a TOS fan. I really enjoy the TOS movies. Like seriously, the Star Trek movies for the original characters are amazing, and I love them. Can't get into the TV show for some reason. I have tried multiple times at multiple points in different parts of the seasons. I've tried watching episodes, and I'm just like, I just can't get into them. That being said, there is one episode that I vividly remember where Spock and Kirk are fighting over a woman for some reason. I don't know why Spock was fighting over her, but that was happening. So, yeah. But I do love the other shows. Like I could say, I know what my favorite episode of Voyager. It's Endgame for sure. Although someone to watch over me in Voyager is pretty good. Raffinetti says Catalyst was fantastic. Before the Andor show came out, I read Catalyst and Rebel Rising. Smart move. I read Catalyst right before the movie Rogue One came out, and it was superb. It was just it was superb, and it just really enhanced the movie. Hymns Are Beautiful says, I have a hard time reading true futuristic sci-fi because I truly believe the second coming will occur before this stuff takes place. How do you handle this? To me, it's kind of like, sci-fi. It's like, it's fiction. It's fake. I'm suspending disbelief. If I can suspend the idea that there are elves and dwarves and stuff, if I can suspend that, I can also suspend the idea that the sci-fi stuff happens differently than my beliefs. So I understand your difficulty with that, but I don't have that difficulty as much. Where is it? Jacob Ritter says, "Do you like the Dune series?" So I loved the first Dune novel, Dune. I thought it's amazing, and then I read two of the sequels, Dune Messiah, Children of Dune, and didn't like those. But then I read the two of the prequels by Kevin Anderson and Brian Herbert, and loved those. So I'm getting into the Dune universe, just not the way most people would prefer. And of course, the new Dune movie is one of my favorite movies of all time. Let's see. That one guy named Raimi asks, have you read any of the novelizations for any of the Star Wars films? Yes, I have read all the sequel novelizations. I've read the Rogue One novelization. I've read the Solo novelization, and I've read all of the prequel trilogy novelizations. So the only novelizations I haven't read are the original trilogy. Those are the only ones I haven't read. Favorite out of those is probably the Rogue One novelization. Although everyone else says the episode 3 one is so amazing, and I'm like, I don't actually remember it because I read it like a decade ago, so I need to go back and reread it. Jeremy turns the page. Do you have a favorite season of Trek? Love the channel, by the way. Thank you, Jeremy. My favorite season of Star Trek, I love season 4 and 5 of Voyager. The exploration of the character of Seven of Nine in those two seasons is just amazing, and has some of the best episodes. The Bride of Chaotica episode, which I'm pretty sure is in season 5. Oh, that is a hilarious episode. I always love that episode, and so the exploration there is good. Season 7 would have been good, but there's some bad episodes in season 7 of Voyager. I also really enjoyed TNG's seasons 3 and seasons 4, which I thought was pretty good. And then what else can I read? What else can I suggest? Oh, Picard season 3. Picard season 3 is like one of the best seasons of. Now, there's 3 episodes left, so I reserve the right to yank and say nope. But I'm pretty sure it's gonna be good. Raf Fanetti says, OMG, so jealous that you read Catalyst before the movie, you lucky muffin. Well, the story there is that the first Star Wars novel that I read on release day was Ahsoka. I actually just happened to see a review of it, and the person said it released today. And so I was like, oh, I need to go get it. Then after that, I looked up Star Wars novels releasing soon, and I got a list. And then so I started reading them on release day. And the Catalyst novel released in November, exactly right about 1 month before the movie Rogue One was going to come out. So I bought it, read it on release day, loved it, Well, I didn't read it all. Like I started on release day and finished it a few days after, and then of course the movie came out, and it really enhances the movie. It really does. I wish part of me wishes Rebel Rising had come out before, but then again, it ruins the prologue of the movie. But the prologue of the movie is basically like the feeling that Catalyst. It felt like it was a continuation of Catalyst, so it felt like it worked. And there's a scene in the movie that it's actually in Catalyst, which is actually quite funny. Um, uh, Revenge of the Sith novelization was so good. Goober says, yes, a lot of people tout that one. What is your favorite fiction novel? Has to be Elantris. I talk about it so much. Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. That's my favorite fiction novel of all time. Although there are other series I like just as much. Jacob says, how would you recommend a total newbie to get into Star Trek? So if you're talking about getting into the TV shows or movies, I think that you can get into the Next Generation. Just start it. Very easy to get into. Even I would say and even just watch a few episodes of Next Gen and start thinking, do you like it or not? And then if you end up not liking it, jump into you could try Voyager. I think that Voyager's very easy to get into, and it takes place, it starts out with some references to other Star Trek things, and then it's on its own setting. Also, I think that the Star Trek movies, particularly the first 6, you could watch one, which don't start with one. You could watch 2, 3, and 4, which are like an amazing trilogy, 2, 3, and 4, and then you could watch 6. And those are great for getting you into the Star Trek universe and understanding the characters and all that stuff. 2, 3, 4, and 6 are what's going to do it for you, in my opinion. Favorite TV show, Tristan Porter? Oh, it's The West Wing. Gotta be The West Wing. Absolutely my number one, for all time. Now, maybe some other shows come close, like Game of Thrones was pretty good for a while, except it dropped off in the last 2 seasons. I'd say that Parks and Rec is one of my favorites. Modern Family is, but West Wing, like nothing is going to take that title. It's amazing. Although my favorite Star Wars show right now is Andor, because that was great. Hymns are beautiful. Thank you. I want to point out, thank you so much for the kind donation. That is the first ever super chat I've ever gotten on the channel. That is really nice. Hymns are beautiful. I really appreciate it. I'll anxiously await your Divergent reviews. I'll not have to. Now I have to. That one guy says Raimi. The other one guy named Raimi says, other than Star Wars, did you like George's other franchise, Indiana Jones? I loved the first and the third movies. I loved not Temple of Doom. I loved Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I loved Last Crusade. Did not care for Temple of Doom, and I actually thought that Crystal Skull wasn't that bad. I thought it was fine. I thought it was better than Temple of Doom. I'm gonna duck as people attack me after that. No, but I loved I loved the third one, Last Crusade. Last Crusade is so funny, so entertaining. I'm really looking forward to the new Indiana Jones movie when it comes out. I'm hoping it's good. I really want to read some of the novels. I know that James Luceno wrote under a pen name, wrote some of the young adult novels, and then I know that there are some novelizations out there that are pretty good. So I know one of my friends over at the Geek's Attic, Matthew, he read some of the novelizations and liked them. Goobers says, favorite magic system, high fantasy or low fantasy? I typically prefer high fantasy when it comes to storytelling styles than low fantasy, but I actually prefer to read soft magic systems. Like the Shannara novels are pretty low, not low fantasy, but there's not really much defined to the magic system. I don't care about magic systems. That being said, the best magic system is in the Rune Lords, in my opinion. Although all the Brandon Sanderson magic systems are interesting, and I just read the Rhapsody trilogy, which is really good. So that those magic systems are good. Next, Raffinetti, you didn't finish Catalyst on the first day. You were on the verge of greatness. You were this close. Yes, Raffinetti, really man of your talents. Yes. I try to buy every novel on release day, but depending on work, depending on other things I'm reading, I might be in the middle of another novel. This is interesting. I try to schedule my reading so that right when a new novel comes out, I've finished the previous novel that I'm reading, so I can start writing to something. But that doesn't always work. John Jack says, so you said you look at the Star Wars EU as its own universe and the Disney canon novels as its own universe. Yeah, basically. It's like two timelines, there's how Marvel is doing like multiverse type things. It's kind of like that. It's like they're all Star Wars stories. It's just this one of them is following this path and one of them's following this path, and they might happen to have characters or themes, or they might even have general ideas, like the children of Han and Leia and Luke all end up fighting each other, and one of them's on the dark side and one of them's on the light side. Like that's an idea it was so obvious that that's an idea to do that it makes sense that both timelines came up with that idea. Just one was in Legends and one was in canon. So that's how I feel about that. Steve Holmes says Andor had no right to be that good. I know. I do a podcast with my friend called Two Sons of Tatooine. We try to record every week or two. For sure every 2 weeks, but we try to do every week. But we were on that podcast, and my co-host was hyping up Kenobi and was like, he didn't care about Andor at all. He was only going to watch it because it was coming out. And I told him, I said, Kenobi's going to disappoint people because there are too high expectations, and no one's going to be expecting Andor. And I think that Andor is going to be amazing. And I was right. And I'm super happy. And I'm glad people are getting into Andor. I wish the ratings were better. But I'm glad that it's one of the most well-regarded shows among the fandom, I would say. Where am I? Great Books Guy says, will you ever read any of the Young Indiana Jones series, any of the Alien books, any Ian Fleming's James Bond books? It is not an issue of would I read them. It's do I have time or can I fit them in? At the moment, it's not in my foreseeable future for the next 6 months, but I could get into them for sure. And if something changed, like if the new Indiana Jones movie is my favorite movie of all time, then maybe I'd go jump back into the universe, but it's not in my immediate future. But I would love to read that. Love to read the Alien novels by Steve and Stephanie Perry. I'd love to get into the Ian Fleming James Bond novels. So yeah, for sure. Brandon Harbeck says, have you checked out any of James Swallow's TOS or Titan novels outside of the crossover miniseries The Fall? So I have purchased one of his Titan novels, one of his later Titan novels that he wrote, and I apologize that I cannot find it at the moment, but I have one of his later ones, and then I have actually today my parents are in another town. They're doing a work thing in another town, and so my mom happened to go to McKay's bookstore in Knoxville, and she said, hey, do you want me to pick up any books for you that I find? And so we found some James Swallow Titan novels, Synthesis she found there, so I'll be getting that eventually. TOS books, I haven't read any of his TOS, but I would be certainly interested in reading them. I've read his crossover novel for The Fall, which was amazing, and his crossover novel for the Coda series, which was my favorite book in the Coda series. I see you say Synthesis is great, and so is The Ladder Fire. So yeah. Subshooting 84 says, what Star Wars books do you recommend a new Star Wars reader to read? They're always the same answers. If you're going into Legends for series, read the Thrawn trilogy, the Jedi Academy trilogy, and the X-Wing books. And I'm going to begrudgingly say read the Darth Bane books. You'll get a full understanding of the EU and its general idea if you read those types of books. And then I would throw in for standalones, read Kenobi and read Darth Plagueis. So that's for Legends. For canon, I would say get into Master and Apprentice, Dark Disciple, the Thrawn books, particularly the first trilogy, the Thrawn Alliance's Thrawn Treason. Maybe Lords of the Sith is a good one for an opener. And I would Phasma. And then I would say try out Aftermath. And then if you don't like it, the Aftermath trilogy and probably the Alphabet Squadron trilogy is probably not for you. But if you do enjoy it, then you have those books to get into. So that's what I would recommend. Hymns are beautiful. Oh, I'm going to go back to Cyclone Scotty for a second. Do you have any non-genre fiction, like more classical fiction? If so, what are some of your favorites, i.e. the types of books you read in school? My favorite like classical book is Silas Marner by George Eliot. Book made me cry. I thought that was such a good book. Uh, can you count Agatha Christie? Because you can, because I know she's mystery, so that's a genre. But if you can count that, I'm putting Crooked House on there. Oh man, is Crooked House amazing? Um, and then There Were None is also pretty good. But that I would put that on there. I do not like classics as a general rule, so what I've read I haven't loved. So that's why I don't talk about them much and don't read them much, because I want to read what I'm enjoying. Um, uh, Hymns are beautiful. I enjoy receiving books during videos about books. I just received a book in the mail, Reformation commentary on Scripture Psalm 1 through 72. I've been trying to get into more commentaries. There was one commentary that I read that was about uh, an actual shepherd who was commenting on the psalm on I shall not watch or I shall not fear that psalm. I thought that was a great book. That commentary was pretty good. I don't know what because this ginger bakes. Thanks for being here. Jacob Ritter says, could I read the Canon Thrawn books before the Legends books? I want to be caught up on Canon Thrawn before the Ahsoka show releases. So here's what I'll say. Yes. So I know two people who did this. My co-host on my podcast, who's my best friend. And then also when I was in high school, one of my teachers was a Star Wars fan. And so he read the Canon Thrawn books without reading the Legends books. Both of them loved the Canon Thrawn books and love the character, love his character in Rebels, and they really got into it. So yes, you can. I think you are enhanced if you've read the Legends stuff, because I believe they're going to pull more from Legends for the Ahsoka series. But you can absolutely read just the canon stuff if you want, and that's a quicker. Just get through those. You don't have to worry about both. And at least the canon stuff is part of the canon, so that's officially part of his character. Whereas the Legend stuff, it's like they're pulling from that. So it's up to you, but you can do both, or you can just do one or the other. It's up to you. Bull Run, hello, what's up? Hey, I was just referencing you. Someone asked about source books, and I was like, I don't have the best answer, but I know Bull Run does. So good to see you. Predator Production says, do you think Lucasfilm should make more novels between Return of the Jedi and the sequels, something with Ben Solo and Luke's other Jedi apprentices, akin to the canon versions of the Young Jedi Knights and New Jedi Order? Yes, that is exactly what they should do. We need more post-Return of the Jedi novels. We need young adult, middle grade books. I still think that the best kids books for Star Wars are the Young Jedi Knights books, and you could totally do that in the canon, just change it a little bit, make them when Ben Solo was younger, make them with maybe some new characters and stuff, but you can absolutely do that, and I think that people would gobble that up. I know I would, and I would like it better than some of the young adult and middle grade books we've been getting recently. So yeah, I totally want that. Predator Production, good option. I should have had something like that in my video that I made on suggestions for Star Wars publishing. I had something similar where I want an ongoing series, but I didn't mention that one specifically. Ralph Vanetti says, Chuck Wendig's Aftermath is an acquired taste, I think. I went along the trilogy and got more used to his chapters that are detached from the main plot. Yeah. In reality, you could just skip those. Like I listened to a podcast full of Sith where they said, yeah, if you don't like those, just skip them. It's fine. You don't have to read the interludes, and now you will understand things more. For instance, the character from Book of Boba Fett and also from Mandalorian season 2, one of the characters from that, the Marshal, he's in the interludes, and the interludes only from the Aftermath novels. That's where he came from. So if you if you want to get the full understanding, read the interludes, but you don't have to really just read the story. Like, I still think the first Aftermath worked for me because the style of story, having these various kind of rebels who are like an eclectic group who happen to come together towards the end. That's just a story that works for me, even though I don't like his writing style. So Let's see where I was. Subshooting84 says, "Thank you. I'm currently reading Outbound Flight. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. One of the best Legends novels." Goobers, do you have any recurring tropes in books that you love? Like, I really like the self-sacrifice trope in books. I think that's a great trope. I love the friends to lovers trope that happens a lot. I really like the chosen one trope. I really like the quest trope. I really like the wise leader withholds information because he doesn't want to hurt the people on the quest, like Gandalf withholds information to Frodo, or Alanon withholds information in Shannara, or Dumbledore withholds information. I love that kind of trope when it's used right. So yeah, I would say that's one that I really like. Because this ginger bakes. Post Nemesis, where do I start reading Trek? I have read all of the Trek novels since 2018. Plus, I started the Titan series. Wait, I have read all of the Trek novels since 2018. Okay, so if you want to start out, the first books are the Avatar books. That's where everyone recommends you start, and I can pull those out for a second. The Avatar books for Deep Space Nine, and then the Mission Gamma books. Those go together as a good opening. For Voyager, start with Homecoming, the Homecoming duology, and then read Full Circle. And then for the TNG is really hard to follow all of it because it's all over the place. I would say Before Dishonor and a few others will get you to Destiny. Destiny is like you're trying to get there. And then once you get to Destiny, you can go in whatever direction you want. Voyager, DS9, Titan, those books really kind of go off, even the crossover books. The ultimate crossover is the Prey trilogy, in my opinion. That's my favorite crossover trilogy. I'm re-listening to the audiobooks, and I think they're amazing. Um, but I hope you get into some of them. If you've read all the ones since 2018, good on you. And did you read the Coda ones, or are you excluding those? Anyway, I'll keep going. The Goat says, "Is there a specific order to read the EU for beginners? I've heard that the Thrawn trilogy should come first, but what else after that?" Man, that's a recurring question today. Start with the Thrawn trilogy. Go with release order if you can. The Jedi Academy trilogy is worth reading, and then also the X-wing series, and then kind of go from there. You kind of want to navigate your way through the Bantam era until you get to the Del Rey era. When Del Rey, they did the Old Republic, they did the prequels, and they had the New Jedi Order series, and so they kind of went all the directions. And at that point, it's just read the books in a series order or in publication order if you can. But it's understandable. All of the authors write books and try to, unless it's like the second book in a trilogy, all authors try to write a first book in a series as if you haven't read that much, so that they can introduce you and get new readers in. So it's still worth jumping in. Just try to find some publication order information. That'll help you a little bit. Um, uh, Alexa Jovanik, I'm sorry. Do you read sci-fi comics? Some favorites if you do. I don't read comics. I have all of the comics that you see right here on my shelves is all of the comics that I have. All of them. I do not read comics that much. Some Star Wars ones, and that's it. I'm not a comics person. I'm sorry. Let's see where I was. Bull says, hopefully they will between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens. Yeah. Joffrey, is that how you say it? Geoffroy Castro. Hi, Jonathan. Hope all is well. Have you considered reading the Star Trek New Frontier series? Yes, I have considered it, and I want to read it eventually. You don't see it on the floor behind me. I have like 100 Star Trek novels that are just on the floor because I can't fit them on my shelves and I haven't read them yet. I have 100 that I've read and 100 that I need to read. So it's like I'm trying to get there. Just there's too much. Bullrun says, yeah, Aftermath is awesome. Cobb Vanth, that's the name I couldn't remember. Cobb Vanth, yeah. Hymns Beautiful says, as a history teacher, I am surprised you don't read alternate history. I have so many things to read. I just haven't gone into that. And sometimes when I'm reading an alternate history, it feels like I'm doing work again. Like I already spend my entire day reading out of a history textbook talking about historical events. And sometimes I'm just like, I don't want to keep reading that at the end of the day. I'm just kind of tired and I just want to read something fun and simple. And if I'm reading a alternate history, I'd be like ooh, that's different. Ooh, but that's different. And it will be fun, but maybe that's something to do over the summer or do on like a spring break or something, but not one I could do during while teaching because I feel like that's too much of the same for me. What was the reference book question? Bull Run says they were asking some suggestions and which reference books are good and worth reading. Bull Run. Sub shooting 84. Are there any books about Cad Bane? I do not know. I don't know. There is an episode of or 2 episodes of the Bad Batch with Cad Bane, and his entrance in the Bad Batch is one of the best entrances of a Star Wars character ever for anything. I loved his entrance in the Bad Batch. I flipped out when I was watching it. Um, because this ginger bakes says, yes, Coda was amazing. I'm sure I missed some backstory. Oh, absolutely. I want to pick your brain further because if you haven't read all the previous novels, oh man, that's so fascinating. Like to me, I was so sad at the end. I wanted to cry because my favorite characters have been dying, and my favorite storyline of a book series that had been going on for years was ending. And even though I've not been around. I started reading Star Trek books in 2017, so I'm fairly new to reading them. I've read books from before that, but I didn't start my journey until then. But for the people who started reading in 2002, 2001, when the books started coming out for Post Nemesis, I can't imagine what they were feeling when they read Coda. Oh man. Oh man. Um uh let's go through. Great books guy says, any favorite historians? Just curious. Favorite historians. I mean, I really enjoy Meacham, John Meacham. I think he's probably my favorite. I've read some of his books, and he tends to write the books I like the most. Um, I also enjoy David Barton, but he's more into Christian history than specifically general history. But Meacham is where it's at generally, probably. Bull Run says, I read the source book, especially the canon ones. Spider, I hope I said that. Quick question. Do you need to play KOTOR in order to read the Old Republic book tie-ins? No. Except for Revan. I think you should play. Well, okay, I'll say I only played the first portion. I only played the Taurus portion of Knights of the Old Republic, which is just the first planet. And then I read Revan, and I enjoyed it, but I felt it spoiled things and didn't work as well. But the Darth Bane trilogy, the some of the other ones, Knight Errant, the Lord's Lost Tribe of the Sith, all that stuff, you do not need to have played the game. Absolutely not. Let's see where I am. Oh my. Are there book tropes that make you roll your eyes? Book tropes that make me roll my eyes. When characters profess their love and they've not even been dating at all, that kind of thing I roll my eye. I'm like, you guys have no personal chemistry. That I roll my eyes a little bit. When it's the there's this piece of information that we didn't reveal, but now we can reveal. So we save the day at the last minute. That's not exactly ex machina, but when the information is withheld till the end, and so the audience has no way to know how to solve the problem, that I get a little frustrated by. Raffinate says, I checked Wikipedia, and Cad Bane has a few comic book appearances, but no books, nor canon or legends. So too bad. Predator Productions says, Charles Soule created some characters for the Rise of Kylo Ren comic run, but they felt kind of underdeveloped, and I hope they give him the chance to build on that. Even just one novel would be great. He has proven he can write great novels. He wrote Light of the Jedi for Star Wars, which was fantastic, but he also wrote the kind of thriller novel, The Oracle Year, which I read, which was amazing. And so I want to get more novels from him. Too many comics. We don't need more comics from him. We need more novels from him. I really want them. So yeah, I would be interested in that. I didn't read that comic series, even though I thought about it, but I want some novels from him on that. Let's see where the chat is at. The Knights of the Ren, they're in the other comics right now, but I would say undeveloped. Yeah, Spider says, yeah, I've read Knight Errant. It wasn't my favorite, I'll admit, but I think it's a very underrated and didn't have a problem with it, as a lot of people tend not to like it. What a lot of people miss is that that book is an allegory. The Sith are allegory for the Communist Party, and the idea of how the communists in Russia are different from the communists in China, who are different from the communists in Thailand, who are different from the communists around here. And so it shows how the different sects of the Sith operate like the different sects of the Communist Party. When you think about it that way, it makes the book have a totally different perspective, and I really, really enjoyed it for that. But it's one of John Jackson Miller's weakest novels. I'll cop to that. It's one of his weakest novels. It's his weakest Star Wars one, probably one of his weakest overall. But I still really love it. I really enjoy it. Let's see. Neil with the deal says, I like Star Wars. Me too, as does this thing. Any thoughts on classic sci-fi radio programs? There are several radio programs that have adapted classic sci-fi books into episodes. I don't listen to radio programs. I know they did something for Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I know they did some from some H.G. Wells stuff. I know that the H.G. Wells stuff caused them problems because people thought there was an actual invasion. That's old. That's old stuff. And I know they did some Star Wars radio dramas, but it's just that's not something I've gotten into, so I can't comment too much on it. Spider says, well, hold off on Revan, but read the other High Republic books. My PC broke recently, so I probably won't get the games. I'm so sorry, Spider. Because this Ginger Bake says, have you read the Starfleet middle grade books for TOS, TNG, DS9, and Voyager? No, the only middle grade Star Trek books I've read were A Dangerous Trade and Supernova for Prodigy, which I thought were very well done. I thought A Dangerous Trade was my favorite of the two, but I thought they were both very good. Other than that, I haven't read any middle grade for Star Trek. There are like 800 adult novels for Star Trek. Adult and young adult, haven't even gotten to the middle grade. Like there's probably over 1,000 when you add middle grade. So, whoo, boy, is there so much Star Trek to read. Star Wars, like I've read like 90% of the adult and young adult Star Wars stuff. I've read like 90%. But Star Trek, oh man, there's so much. There's so much. Goobers says flesh bags are overrated. Flesh bags? I don't know what you mean by that. Favorite robots in fantasy. I am partial to Chopper from Star Wars Rebels. Robots. I'm looking at my fantasy series, or sorry, my fantasy sci-fi series. I'm not thinking about robots so much in them. Some of the robots in the I don't remember their names specifically, but I like the robots in Kevin J. Anderson's Saga of the Seven Suns series. I liked those robots there. Other than that, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on robots in sci-fi. But I mean, if you're thinking Star Wars, I mean, it's pretty obvious. Chopper from Rebels is good. C-3PO and R2 are good. Alan Tudyk's character from Rogue One, K2SO, he was hilarious in that. Oh, he was hilarious. And BB-8 is so sweet. So sweet. All right. Let's see the next one. The Divergent is so much better than the Hunger Games. It's something I'd recommend to any Christian high school teacher to teach. Interesting. I had heard the reverse, so I'm interested to see that. I have read Hunger Games, so I can compare them once I've read the Divergent series. And I actually know someone who owns them, so I might be able to borrow them. But I don't usually borrow. I try to buy all my books. Rafane says, if you could wipe your memories about a particular Star Wars book so you can experience it for the first time again, which would it be? It would be a toss-up. So Star by Star from the New Jedi Order, oh man, are the twists and surprises in that book amazing. So Star by Star would be one of them. I'd also say the original Thrawn trilogy, maybe, or the Hand of Thrawn duology, maybe. Also, so I'm not a huge Darth Bane fan, but if I could go back into the Darth Bane series blind, that would be a blast because it was an eye-opening experience to be read. Would I do that for canon at all? Maybe Thrawn, maybe. None of the others really I want to do. Go back in blind. So I don't know. I'd say that. Did you ever read any Goosebumps? No, but after it's been in the news recently because of all the changes to it, I've been like, ooh. And I've been trying to get into I've been really trying to get into middle grade horror recently. And so I've read some middle grade horror, and like he's like the king of middle grade horror. So I would like to get into R.L. Stein's Goosebumps series. Um, sub shooting, perfect. Do you have any horror book recommendations? Anything by Dan Wells is great. I love his I Am Not a Serial Killer trilogy. Amazing. Some of my favorite horror stories. I don't really like horror stories anyway, but I like Dan Wells. Also, Extreme Makeover blew my mind. Oh my goodness, did that blow my mind. And also Delilah Dawson's The Violence, really good book. It's a little bit politically triggering, and also there's some other stuff in there, but it's the violence is very good. Awesome. Are you going to read the next Prodigy book coming out this year? Yes, if I have the time. It's not like high on my priority list, but it's like on my list of to be read eventually because I liked the previous ones. Spider says I've been collecting in chronological order. I've read all the Old Republic except for the game tie-ins, and I've read the entire Rise of the Sith era. Bull Run says my recs for the defense books are the Star Wars Complete Vehicles, Incredible Cross Section, New Edition, Battles That Changed the Galaxy, Star Wars book, Expand Your Knowledge in a Galaxy Far, Far Away. But there's more. Yeah. So I basically read everything from Dawn of the Jedi to The Approaching Storm. My favorite so far is Plagiarism. That makes sense. Cian Monahan says, just joining now. Love the videos. Well, thank you, Cian. Yeah, Bull Run, you're not a fan of the Divergent series. Yeah, I've heard both things. I've heard some people love Divergent over Hunger Games, and some people love Hunger Games over Divergent. So I'd have to get into them. Spice says, I can't find most of the OG trilogy era novels or the New Republic, so I've just been reading a lot of the prequel books since that's what I've been finding at BAM and Barnes and Noble. Yeah, you have to go to a lot of used bookstores for a lot of the Legacy of the Force or the New Jedi Order, or even a lot of the Bantam stuff. A lot of the Bantam stuff is exclusive to the used bookstores. What do you do while you listen to an audiobook? I do lesson plans while I listen to audiobooks. Also, I listen to it when I'm driving. Those are the only two times I do audiobooks, when I'm doing lesson plans or when I'm driving, because those are usually mind numbing enough that I can focus on listening. Any other time, even if I'm cleaning stuff in the house, I usually would prefer to have a show on, or when I'm eating dinner or doing dishes, I'd rather have a show on. But audiobooks, so I listen to I listen to 2 to 3 audiobooks a year maximum, whereas I read like 100 novels a year. So it's like I don't really do audiobooks that much. But when I do, it's when I'm driving or and it's not even always when I'm driving. Sometimes when I'm driving, I do YouTube. I listen to live streams from people, or listen to other YouTube videos. So, have you read the Phasma tie-in comic to The Last Jedi? No, but after how much I love the Phasma novel, I'd be interested, perhaps. Joe Raffinay says, I personally read along to the book itself. Yeah, I read way faster than the audiobook version. Even when I put in on like 1.5 speed, I'm still reading too fast for them. So I don't like that. I'm going to take a quick drink right now because I've been talking for a while. Okay, I'm sorry about that. Let's go through. Spire says also, I see you talk about Rune Lords a lot, so I recently got the first book. Haven't read it yet, but since I'm getting into the series because you highly recommend it, I thought I'd let you know. Oh, that's so nice. Thank you. I hope you enjoy it. You can't say the magic system is boring because it's not, and it has some interesting moments. About 2/3 of the way through is the make or break. Will you keep going? I think, but I think it's worth. What are your thoughts on Agatha Christie's works being rewritten? That is so frustrating. I know why they renamed one of her novels, because one of her novels did not have a good title back in the day. And if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. But other than that, no, they should not be changing her novels at all. Her works are great. At least as well, maybe they're just changing the lines in there. But even though it's a slippery slope, even bad books should not be changed in posterity, because the author had an intention of when they wrote it, should not go back and change it. I know some authors disagree with me on this, but like it's like once the book's turned in and it's published, that's a book. You want to write a sequel or you want to write like a redo of your own version, that's fine. But once the author's dead, don't change books. That's awful. Have you read any of the Hand of Thrawn 45 books? I just bought a copy of his X-Wing #0 Hand of Judgment novel. I Hand of Thrawn 45. I don't know. It apparently ties up loose plot threads between the 3 X-Wing books and the comics, The Fell, etc. If you're talking about the Hand of Thrawn duology, yes, I've read that. And it does tie up some of the other stuff, but I'm not sure if I'm following entirely. Spider says, "Have you read any of the Jack Ryan or Jack Reacher books?" I have read 2 Jack Ryan novels. I read Hunt for October, which was amazing, and I read Cardinal of the Kremlin, which I thought was fine, just fine. And I have more. I have what are the ones I have? I have Clear and Present Danger, and I have Some of All Fears to be read eventually. Revan says, "Hey man, totally forgot you were doing a stream today, so I'm late to the party. LOL." Glad to see you, Caleb. Go check out Caleb Likes Books. That's a great channel. I know he'll appreciate if you go check out his channel, Caleb Likes Books. Alan Rule says, "Have you or do you have any plans to read The Theft of Swords and its sequels?" Haven't heard too much about it, so maybe one day. Is that Michael J. Sullivan? I'm trying to remember. But that sounds like something I'd enjoy because it sounds very fantasy-like. Yeah, I saw the Agatha Christie book in a used bookshop. Very dodgy name to say the least. Yep. Okay, you know what I'm talking. You know what I'm talking about. Seeing, yeah, that was a problematic title. Like the book itself. The book itself is amazing, but it's like, did nobody proof this? Did nobody tell her maybe don't title it this? Anyway, the goat says, "Have you read Lord of the Rings?" Thoughts? Yes, read it. Very hard to read. Like so many of my students at school who are like 12-year-olds are like, "I want to read Lord of the Rings," and I'm like, "No, you don't. No, you don't." And one of them tried, and she started, and she stopped exactly where I thought she would stop. She stopped exactly where I told her she would end up stopping. And I said, "You should have kept reading. You should have kept reading." But I love the trilogy, but it's hard to recommend for beginners. I much prefer the Baron and Luthien novel. Gonna try to get through the rest of these. Did you check out the Star Trek Picard audio drama No Man's Land? If not, it's short and really good. Seven and Raffi's story. I do not like where they took Seven and Raffi in the season 2. And also, I'm not an as like I only do audiobooks for rereads. So unless they release it as a print version, I'm not gonna read it, unfortunately, which is sad. Have you read any video game tie-in books? Well, obviously, I've read the Force Unleashed novel, which, by the way, Bull Run, we experienced